If your Azure Front Door health probes are using the default settings, you're probably routing traffic to dead backends right now and you don't even know it. I've seen this take down production apps for 45 minutes because nobody configured the probe interval correctly.
Okay, that's terrifying. Welcome back to the Network Ninja Cloudcast, everyone. I'm really glad we're covering this because I just set up Front Door last week and I definitely left everything on defaults.
And that's exactly why we need to talk about this. So let me ask you, when you configured your backends, did you think about what happens when one of your regions goes down?
Honestly, I assumed Front Door would just figure it out. Like, it's a global load balancer, right? Doesn't it automatically know when something's broken?
It does, but only if you tell it how to check. Think of it like this. Imagine you're a delivery driver with packages for 2 warehouses across town. You need to know which warehouse is actually open before you drive there. You could just show up and hope for the best, or you could call ahead every few minutes to check if they're accepting deliveries.
So the health probes are like those phone calls to check if the warehouse is open.
Exactly. And here's where the defaults hurt you. By default, Front Door sends a health probe every 30 seconds using a GET request to your route path. If your app takes 10 seconds to fail over, that's potentially 40 seconds of users hitting a dead backend.
Wait, so I should just crank the probe interval down to like 5 seconds?
You could, but there's a trade-off. More frequent probes mean more requests hitting your backends. For a simple setup, that's fine, but if you have 50 backend pools across 10 regions, those probe requests add up. The sweet spot I recommend is 10 to 15 seconds for production workloads. You can also switch from GET to head requests if you want to reduce bandwidth on those probes. Now, where you configure this depends on which Front Door tier you're using. If you're on Front Door Classic, you'll find it under Front Door Designer in the health probe settings for each backend pool. But if you're on the newer standard or premium tiers, which is what Microsoft recommends now, you'll configure health probes within origin groups through the Front Door Manager blade.
Oh, good to know. I think I set up standard tier, so I'll look for origin groups instead of backend pools.
Right. Just remember the terminology difference. Classic uses backend pools, standard and premium use origin groups. Same concept, different names.
What about the actual health check endpoint? You mentioned it defaults to the route path.
This is where I see the biggest mistakes. Your route path might return 200 OK even when your database connection is completely dead. You need a dedicated health endpoint, something like /health or API/health, that actually validates your dependencies. In ASP.NET Core, you'd use the built-in health checks middleware. In Node, you'd create an endpoint that pings your database and cache before returning 200.
So the health endpoint should fail if any critical dependency is down?
Exactly. And here's the technical detail that trips people up. By default, Front Door considers a backend healthy if it receives a 200 through 399 status code, though you can customize that range if needed. Anything outside that range marks it unhealthy. Same goes for probe timeouts, which default to 30 seconds, and TCP connection failures. So if your health endpoint throws a 503 service unavailable when the database is down, Front Door will stop routing traffic there within your probe interval plus the sample threshold.
What's the sample threshold?
Great question. Front Door doesn't mark a backend unhealthy after just one failed probe. It uses a sliding window approach with 2 settings: sample size and successful samples required. By default, the sample size is 4 and successful samples required is 2. Now here's the key thing to understand. The successful samples setting means how many probes must succeed within that window for the backend to stay healthy. So with those defaults, if fewer than 2 of your last 4 probes succeed, meaning 3 or more fail, the backend gets marked unhealthy.
Oh, so it's tracking successes, not failures. That's an important distinction.
Exactly. And I've seen people get that backwards and end up with failover thresholds that don't behave how they expected. If you want faster failover, you could set sample size to 4 and successful samples required to 3, meaning just 2 failures would trigger unhealthy status. Just be careful not to make it too sensitive or you'll get false positives from network hiccups.
Okay, so we've got health probes configured properly. What about the actual routing rules? How does Front Door decide which region to send traffic to?
Front Door's default behavior is latency-based routing, meaning it sends users to the healthy backend with the lowest latency from their location. But you can influence this with priority and wait settings. Here's the thing though. Priority and wait work within the context of how Front Door evaluates backends. If you set your East US backend to priority 1 and West US to priority 2, Front Door will prefer East US, but latency still plays a role. If 2 backends have similar latency from a user's perspective, then priority becomes the deciding factor.
So it's not strictly priority 1 always wins? It's more nuanced than that?
Right. Think of it as front door balancing latency with your priority preferences. If you really need strict failover behavior where one region handles everything until it dies, you'll want to make sure your priority settings are clear and understand that latency equivalent backends will respect those priorities.
What if I want to split traffic between regions for redundancy, not just failover?
That's where wait comes in. If two backends have the same priority and similar latency characteristics, front door distributes traffic based on their wait values. Set East US to wait 70 and West US to wait 30, and you get roughly a 70-30 split. This is perfect for active-active deployments where you want both regions handling traffic but one taking the majority.
Let me make sure I've got this. Health probes check if backends are alive using GET requests by default, and I should use a custom endpoint that validates dependencies. Set the interval to 10 to 15 seconds, and understand that the sample threshold is based on successful probes required, not failures. For routing, Front Door primarily uses latency-based routing, with priority and wait influencing decisions among backends with similar latency.
Perfect summary. One last pro tip. Always test your failover by manually failing a health check in one region and watching front door's metrics. You'll want to look at the backend health percentage metric in Azure Monitor, or if you're on standard or premium, it's called origin health percentage. You can filter by backend pool and specific backend to see exactly which origins are healthy or unhealthy. Don't wait for a real outage to discover your configuration doesn't work.
That's such a good point. Test before it matters.
That's it for today's episode. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
And share this with anyone who's setting up multi-region deployments on Azure.
Thanks for watching the Network Ninja Cloudcast. See you in the next one.